recap, the reason Sarah and I started this journey was to really get the good word out about oil and gas, particularly in Appalachia. So we center our topics on either education. That could be education that leads to a career in our industry or technology within our industry, those types of subject matter. It could center around legislation. That's either legislation that has already currently been passed or legislation that is being proposed that could affect our activities up here in Appalachia. And then the third and most important thing that we like to cover is the people in this industry that make it the wonderful industry that it is. And there are lots of them. As I say, the previous two episodes, we are still looking for speakers guests for some of our episodes. We do have a relatively full schedule, I think, for the next 3 months, but we are looking a little bit further out from there. And obviously sponsorships as well. Next week, we will be announcing a few of our sponsors that have agreed to be there for Sarah and myself, which will be very exciting. And then, like we do every episode, I really want to take a couple of minutes and just run through some of the oil and gas events that are coming up. We're going to be highlighting March now. So March 8th to 10th is the UGA annual meeting in Columbus, Ohio. This is one of the original kind of oil and gas conferences. I think it's probably been going on longer than the majority of the others that we have up here. It's a great conference. Highlighting during that conference is March 9th. We have Marcellus Utica Gas, one of our charitable organizations here in Appalachia, having their UGA Happy Hour, which is from 3 to 5. So if you're in Columbus for that conference, please make sure to stop by and see everybody at MUG. March 15th, we have the SPE Local Lectures Series. This particular local lecture is going to be on scale remediation in the Marcellus Shale, calcium carbonate, and iron sulfide. And they hold that event at Cephalo's there in Carnegie, PA. March 16th, we have MUG again, Marcellus Utica Gas. They have their March Madness Happy Hour, which is a lot of fun. It's at All Stars in Canonsburg on the 16th, and that's from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. Sarah, you'll be there because you live directly in that area, so she has to be there.
Everyone knows where I live now.
March 21st is the APA Speaker Dinner. You spoke to Jen this morning. Did she tell you anything about what speaker that we have lined up? So that's details to be confirmed or to be determined. We usually have that at Bella Sarah, also in Canonsburg. March 23rd is the American Association of Drilling Engineers Drill Bowl and Student Job Fair. That's a really cool event. I don't know if you've ever gone to that one. We invite a panel of students who are studying petroleum engineering from all of the local colleges, and they are asked multiple questions about drilling processes and practices and compete against each other.
Yeah, you can participate too.
Yes.
Each table gets to participate in the trivia game.
It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. I think our table won last time. We had Ian at our table. So,
oh, there you go.
Yeah, we did good. It had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with Ian. Gotcha, Ian. And then March 24th, which is the day after, is the AADE Topgolf outing. So that's a phenomenal one, too. We usually take over 1 or 2 floors, and it's packed house. So those are the events for March of 2023, and I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
One more event that we would like to propose and kind of plant the seed. So Jennifer and I have this idea. We have a lot of opposition, probably more so than any other basin in the Appalachian Basin, right?
For our industry.
For our industry, correct.
Yeah.
So there have been a lot of different debates, like with Alex Epstein and Bill McKibben, and we would like to propose the idea of coming up with a debate here, specifically tailored to our area. So if you want to leave a comment with supporting ideas, how you think that we could implement this, we're just planting the seed. We just kind of thought about it, but I think it would be a really good idea.
I do too. And you can send us a message through our website, which is www.nacepep1.com. sarahandjenconsulting.com, and then our email addresses are exactly the same. So it's Sarah at sarahandjenconsulting.com, and then Jen at sarahandjenconsulting.com, and then of course you can find us on pretty much every type of social media that there is. So feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. We would really like to get the ball rolling on that for this summer.
Yes. So this episode is really, really exciting because it's a point of contention. We're dealing with pipelines. So I just kind of wanted to give the general public a little bit of a brief 2-minute background about our industry here in the Appalachian Basin. So American energy is the most responsibly sourced energy in the world, indisputably by far. From 2005 to 2019, the U.S. has been the world leader in the reduction of carbon emissions with 959 million metric tons. That is more than the next 8 countries combined, with negligible fluctuations in energy sources. The Appalachian Basin is the driving force to being the world leader in reductions due to its production of reliable, abundant, and dense natural gas. So the Appalachian Basin alone has the capacity of quadrupling its production by 2030 and reduce international emissions by 750 million metric tons of CO2. This is one thing that a lot of people don't know, but we are the largest natural gas field in the world, and we have the lowest methane leak rates. We are the Appalachian Basin is the largest natural gas field in the world, and we have the lowest methane leak rates in the United States, which is 85% lower than the rest of the United States. So specifically in pipelines, the U.S. average is 0.25%, but in Appalachia, it's 0.03%.
It's just a constant testament to how good we're doing up here.
All of this is. Like, it really is, regardless of, which side of the coin you're on, it doesn't matter. You should be supporting this, whether it's, with it being green or with producing or humanity. So a couple more examples. So I just threw a bunch of numbers together, but let me put it into perspective for you. So replacing a typical internal combustion engine, so a typical vehicle with an electric vehicle, reduces carbon emissions by 60%. If you replace coal with natural gas, you get that same 60% carbon emission reduction, but at a much, much larger scale. The second example I wanted to share with you, emissions reduction impact of an unleashed U.S. LNG scenario is equal to electrifying every U.S. passenger vehicle, powering every home in America with rooftop solar, and adding 54,000 industrial scale windmills, doubling U.S. wind capacity combined. So all three of those things combined, if we were able to unleash.
And I think you need to slow down and say that last statement again. I honestly do. Like that one, literally the comparison of us unleashing that, what that is comparable to on a renewable front. Take your time and read it, because people need to hear this. This is the reality.
Okay, I'm going to take my time.
Do it.
The emissions reduction impact of unleashing U.S. LNG scenario, so unleashing natural gas, so just that, is equal to these three things combined. Electrifying every U.S. passenger vehicle. Everyone. Powering every home in America with rooftop solar, and adding 54,000 industrial scale windmills, doubling U.S. wind capacity.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Also, without the subsidies funded by the American tax dollars. So that's kind of a big deal. All of this is a big deal. Also, the International Energy Agency projects by 2050, the renewables as a share of global energy might only reach 20%. This is not due to a lack of support. In 2020 alone, $700 billion was allocated to ESG-friendly investments. In 2014, U.S. capital spending peaked at $140 billion. In 2020, it has only been $30 billion.
And we were talking about this on the drive down, because you're constantly seeing these articles about, disapproval of how some of our really big hitters are spending their profits or contributing to their shareholders. You have a BP or a Chevron, and yes, they have these huge profits, but I don't think we're truly looking at what they then reinvest those profits into. Okay, so you have our industry, and we have, all of the carbon that we produce, which is really equivalent to Amazon or Walmart or anybody else, but we are putting a heck of a lot more of our actual profits back into reducing that constantly. And I think that really needs highlighted.
Yeah, absolutely. So the production is abundant. It's a life-giving gift, which just happens to be the greenest initiative on the planet, and it is limited. It's a bottleneck, so it's limiting factors. Pipelines. That's why our guest is so important.
And he's important anyhow.
Yeah, you're important. I guess so. Your pipeline knowledge is. So we have the ability and we have the reserves, but we have this enormous opposition to building pipelines. We need more. So that's why we're excited to have you on the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is Kyle. Kyle, do you mind starting by just telling us a little bit about yourself, your family, the beginnings of your career, how you kind of fell into this?
Yeah, so my name's Kyle Flanagan. I'm manager of pipeline integrity and compliance at Greylock Energy. I've been in Appalachia for over 12 years. We moved from Colorado, my wife and I. I have 4 beautiful children. Israel, we call her Izzy, Iva, Ingrid, and Isaac. I'm from Huntington Beach, California, hence my accent. I do, yeah. There is conservative Californians, which is crazy. But it was interesting. So I ended up getting opportunity to play football at Colorado School of Mines. So that's kind of what landed me there. I was obviously good at math and science, so STEM was kind of a natural field for me to get into. But when I landed at School of Mines, I really didn't know what type of engineering I wanted to do. So they do a cool thing where they offer department tours, and so they kind of run you through, hey, this is what civil engineering is, this is what mechanical engineering is. And so I sat through several, and I remember Professor Van Kirk, I think he was actually originally a USC guy, so he was actually talking about the oil field in California. And it was crazy because he was specifically like honing in on Southern California, where I'm from, where I grew up, and he's talking about the offshore oil and the pump jacks and stuff. And kind of growing up, this stuff is all around you. I mean, it's like there's literally pump jacks next to $1 million homes.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Did he tell you about how they hide the rigs in LA? Yeah.
So, and that's what I'm getting to that point too, because there's he talked about the Thumb Islands, which the Thumb Islands is a man-made island off the coast of Long Beach. And so Thumb stands for Texaco, Humble, Union, Mobile, Shell. So like the original 5 majors went in with this joint venture. And if you're driving down PCH, there's this man-made island in the Bay of Long Beach. And on that is this tower, and it's disguised. It looks like a structure, but you notice if you've lived there long enough, you notice it moves. Like it's not always in the same position. And it's literally a disguised drilling rig, and they have a big train track that goes around. So the drilling rig sits on a train track. They tram around, and they were doing horizontal drilling out and producing. And there's, 40, 50 oil wells and stuff, and they do workovers and everything on this. So here I am, this kid from California, like lived around this stuff my whole life, had no exposure, no idea what this was. And this guy's explaining all these things that was like, and then, so that really drew me to it, obviously. And then I always joke too about petroleum engineering. I always joke that it's the least engineering of engineering. And what I mean,
there's another petroleum engineer right there.
And what I mean by that is like, you can get out in the field, you can get your hands sturdy, like you're not just punching numbers behind a desk. There's a lot of value and like actually getting out there and problem solving in the field. So kind of those two things combined kind of really drew me to wanting to get involved in the industry.
And you're happy with that decision, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. And it's pretty cool. You've actually been with the same company now since you got into the industry.
Correct.
That's like rare.
Yes.
It's rare for just for anything, for jobs in general, I think now these days, but especially in oil and gas. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, so first off, Greylock has treated me really good, and the predecessor. So I've had some good managers. My current director we kind of came up in the ranks together and everything. So
you do retain a lot of your people. I mean, those are a lot of the same guys that have been there since I started dealing with ECA.
I think because we're kind of that smaller mid,
Yeah.
so there is a little bit of freedom. We don't have as much red tape.
Sure.
And so it may not, and there's not as much politics as you might get at some big companies. So that, and then also I feel like Greylock has given me the opportunity to kind of take what I do and kind of run with it. So previously, kind of our midstream compliance stuff was handled by a third party kind of outside, but the main guy that was handling that retired. And so, I was just, when I was a younger engineer, I was just trying to be as teachable as I could and really try to retain as much as I could and ask a lot of questions. And so when it got to the point to have that switch over, he told our company, he's like, just let Kyle take it. And so they've given me the opportunity to really kind of take ownership of what I do and kind of develop that department.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, I've had a lot of freedom. I've had the ability to
make it your own,
to make it my own,
yeah.
which is, and I think because of that, I have a sense of ownership over it. And because I have that sense of ownership, if something goes wrong with it or something's not right, that doesn't fall on anyone else, and it's not the company's fault. It falls on me.
It's like your baby, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
it's yours.
Can that be stressful?
It can be, but I mean, audits are always stressful.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's across the board.
Yeah.
Though.
Yeah, like because PHMSA, like we fall under PHMSA compliance, all of our DOT stuff. So obviously, whenever you go into a state audit and especially like a federal audit, it is
Intense.
Yeah, it's kind of like taking a final. You don't kind of relax until you're done with it. But it's good. I mean,
or
it's
hosting
good,
a
so.
podcast.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to ask you kind of what your typical role looks like, but I think you did a good job kind of explaining that you get to cover the gamut of things from field level stuff,
Mm-hmm.
Really making that project your own. I don't know if you want to kind of continue on to some of our next subjects, Sarah?
Yeah. Enough about you, Kyle. Let's talk about pipelines. So 7, your background is very interesting, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. We're just switching gears.
That's fine.
7 pipelines in the Northeast, so in the Appalachian Basin, totaling 7 BCF per day, which is 10% production in the United States, have either been canceled or opposed. The pipeline with the largest capacity, the MVP pipeline, appropriately named, its capacity is at 2 BCF per day. This past November, the total project was roughly 94% complete, but it's at a standstill.
Right.
And has been for quite some time.
Yeah, and they're projecting that it's going to be done in late 2023.
We'll believe it when I see it.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I think we all do.
So they're working diligently with federal and state regulators to secure the necessary permits. I guess that is maybe also an exaggeration. Maybe
They've been doing
see.
it for a long time. Listen, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So what do you feel like the tipping point for change would be, and what do you think the long-term effects of the cancel culture will be?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it kind of goes back to what you guys have said in earlier podcasts, and that is, I think as an industry, and this also applies to pipelines, we just really haven't done a good job educating people of the necessity of why they're important. And so, because of that, as of recently, oil and gas has kind of been deemed as the new anti kind of target industry. And so whenever anyone hears anything, associated with fossil fuels, they immediately oppose it. And
Without
so,
looking any
without
further.
looking any
they
further.
think that they're a good person if they do.
Well, yeah, and and so it's an easy thing to do is just to oppose something. The hard thing is to actually look down at the weeds and understand, is this better for the environment? Is this better for humanity or not? And pipelines are the safest way to transport
By
anything.
far.
And East Palestine's a great example
We were talking about that on
of
the drive
the rail
down.
accident. So I think I was looking at the statistics recently. On average, 17 pipeline incidents happen a year. But you look at 17 and say, whoa, that's, maybe that's a lot, maybe it's not. But in the grand scheme of it, it's really small. If you look at rail, there's 1,700 rail derailments a year. If you look at trucks, there's 500,000. But I mean, let's say, okay, a percentage of that is oil and gas, maybe 5,000, truck incidences a year. So you're saying 17 or 1,700 or 5,000. Like, just looking at that, like, you can see pipelines are extremely safe. And the chances are, especially in the region, if you've driven on any major highway, you've crossed multiple high pressure pipelines every single day, like, not even knowing it. They're extremely safe. I think I saw another thing. It was like 99.7% of product that's transported in pipeline is safely, delivered. Like, that's a huge percentage of, like, of keeping the product in the pipe.
And that's just another example of whether you agree with safety or if you agree with environmental, protection or production of natural gas. We're all on the same team as far as pipelines are concerned. And it's counterproductive if you if your main concern is the environment, for you to be anti-pipeline because of the reasons that he just stated. But I just wanted to kind of follow up with something that we talked about right before with you whenever we came in here. People don't understand the necessity for this resource. And you told me a story about a doctor who had to make a decision. Can you?
Yeah, so I was listening to this interview. I think it was Alex Epstein, honestly. He was talking about this doctor in Africa who was running his doctor's office off of whatever solar panels he could get, and he was having to make the decision whether to run the fridge to keep the medicine cold or to run his lights. And that's just, if you look at that and you say, we have in this country and in the world a abundant, low-cost energy source that can be delivered safely, right?
Through pipelines.
And to say that they can't use those means in order to get themselves out of poverty is just not right.
And I think the relevance here with Pennsylvania is, we are currently paying on average 30% more than the rest of the nation for our electric and our gas here in Pennsylvania. And it's under our feet, for goodness sake, guys. We're getting the majority of our energy from other countries and from Canada, and there is no logical reason for us to be doing that. So if you're under any illusion and you say, okay, well, that story's in Africa, you don't see the relevance of it here. But when we start to increase the actual need, which is going to happen, it's not going to level out, and we do not have this infrastructure in place, these difficult decisions are going to come a lot closer home, okay? Yeah. They're going to become reality here.
And it's going to affect the poor people of the world and of our nation.
The ones we're trying to support and look after the most.
Right. When you think about energy, you really have to preference it, and there's three main kind of categories when you're looking at what's the best energy decision to make, right? And so that first category would be, does it deliver on-demand power when I want it, when I need it? So you need to check that box, right? Mm-hmm. The second thing needs to be
solar and wind are intermittent, right?
Right. So is it reliable, right? The second thing would be, is it cost effective, right? And the third thing would be, is it safe for the environment, right? So we have to really look at that energy argument in those three pillars. And the problem is when you start to compare some of these other energy sources to those three different standards, they kind of fall apart. And fossil fuels really do check all those boxes, and nuclear as well. So like you said, for instance, with wind and solar, we saw in Texas during their ice storms and stuff, when the solar panels when the sun wasn't out shining, the windmills weren't spinning or anything, there's a reliability issue there. So you weren't.
They don't have a backup power. They can only be an energy source while the wind and sun is shining. I think
Right.
that's a misconception that people don't understand.
Right. So there's the intermittency problem that you're discussing. And then you look at the next box, right, is the cost effectiveness. Well, we see places like in Germany, their energy prices increased. And the problem is not so much looking at just the windmill and looking at just the solar panel. The issue is looking at the whole supply chain, right? And so when you look at that whole supply chain and you look at the land density issues, and so what I mean by land density is the amount of land you have to use to produce the same amount of power, right?
And that's actually
I,
the next
yeah, go
point
ahead.
that Sarah has, leading right into that.
Yeah, that's crazy. So oil and gas requires a tiny fraction of the footprint
Sure.
or the land required
Right.
to produce than wind or solar. So an acre of oil and gas can serve 181 households. Solar can only serve 1.25, and wind can only serve a half of a household.
And that's per acre, right?
Right.
Those other two
Yes.
are per acre. So you're
Yes.
talking 181 for our nat gas, 1.25 households an acre for wind, and 0.5 households for solar. I
Right.
mean, it's just, I don't know, it's just crazy.
I always think about it like in order to explain it to people kind of in layman's terms is to like let's say this can of soda is like a certain amount of kilowatts, right? So in order to produce, this much power from natural gas, I just need, let's say it's 10 homes. I just need one can of soda. To put that in perspective, in order to produce that same amount of energy for those 10 homes, I'd need 10 cans of soda of, solar, and I need 15 of those for wind. And if you start to look at that, like the amount of land that needs to be used to get the same amount of energy, it's a density issue. Those aren't as dense energy sources. It's a huge footprint. And you start to say, well, what are the environmental impacts of that? And why aren't we looking at the environmental impacts of that? You're clearing how many more trees, you're affecting how many more streams and everything.
I saw it in Berkeley Springs. So down your direction, I literally visited where they were clearing, and they were clearing virgin timber forests to physically put solar panels.
Right.
I'm like, have we lost our ever-loving minds? Like, why are we not looking at brownfield dirt like we did for the Shell cracker, where we're doing remediation and we're returning it to a level where it can be used? No, we're going to go and cut down virgin forest, and we're going to burn it all to the side. We're not going to use that wood, and we're going to put this out there.
Right.
We're going to end up realistically with that will be our landscape, and that'll be it. I mean, it's not sustainable.
Yeah, we totally can't do that. And it's also all connected with like a spider webs of copper. That's how they cut it. It's called transmission sprawl. I can't say it. Transmission sprawl. Yeah.
Well, that is a real issue. Is another issue with alternative is the supply chain issues. By far the most dominant power of manufacturing and control of the supply chains when it comes to renewables is China. China produces about 90% of our photovoltaic cells and wind turbines. They hold the world's largest reserve of rare earth metals, and so you start to do that, and once you start to do the energy transition, you're putting more and more of your eggs into the basket, of China. And what happened, and we saw this happen to the auto industry during the pandemic, right? What happened when China shut down during the pandemic? Well, we couldn't get the electronics and the computer systems for our trucks. The truck industry went, the car industry went crazy, right? Like, with the price of cars went skyrocket, you're waiting months and months to get cars. The used cars market went crazy because, medicine, right? So there is a supply chain issue, and that goes to like a national security issue, right? And so there's another reason why, going back to why we should be producing this low-cost, abundant, safe, when you boil it down, better for the environment resource right under our feet. It's a national security issue as well.
And I try, you have the analogy of the cans. When I'm talking to a lay person about the pipeline systems, I explain to them, listen, they're as integral as our road systems, as our safe
100%.
bridges. So I said to Sarah on the drive down here, I said, imagine if we just stopped maintaining our roads. We didn't build any new roads, and we did that for 20 years. And then you needed to get to Illinois to see a family member. It's not something you can spark up overnight. That's the other implication of all of this, okay? You can't just go out and build a road overnight.
That's a perfect example.
You know, that's not how this works. We need to be consistently and constantly building this infrastructure so that we can be ready when those spikes in needs for energy actually occur here, and we're already seeing them in the Northeast.
Well, you mentioned earlier, too, bottlenecks. There is a huge bottleneck issue in the Northeast. It's because, as we stated earlier, pipelines aren't being allowed to be built and everything. So we have the supply, but we physically can't get the supply to these growing markets that we want to. And that's really hindering us as a country from developing economically, you know, from the surrounding regions that could benefit off of it. The Northeast, you know, Massachusetts, New England is perfect examples where we said, you know, the energy price was 30% more. They're like 70, 80% more because they're trucking everything in and they're shipping everything in and they're bringing everything in by rail. And you pose the question, why are they opposing pipelines from being built for the environment? But what's your alternative? To truck it and to trail it. So is that better for the environment? It's not.
It blows my mind. Yeah. So if in a perfect scenario, if we did have permission to build all of these pipelines and we had full capacity in order to transport it. So right now, in order to react to, you know, price signals, it would take almost 2 years. It would take 18 months, right? So what would the perfect case scenario be?
And it gets longer and longer every month, week that these systems get delayed, right?
Yeah. I mean, like you put in those big pipelines, everything, obviously they're FERC regulated pipelines. I mean, you're looking at, you know, 3 or 4 years, you know, sometimes to get approvals and then the build outs and everything. So it takes an extremely long time. So, you know, the choices that are being made right now and these new pipeline infrastructure being prevented from being built is going to have decade consequences associated with it.
You can't just it's not a light switch here. You know, that's right. What the scary thing about this is. And I think I actually touched on it briefly the last podcast that we had, but I did spend some time in Europe and, you know, living in a country where it is literally nightly news that elderly people are passing in their homes because they're making, and this is not a third world country, guys. This is Europe. They're having to make the choice between food or heating their home, and they're passing in their sleep because they can't afford the energy.
Right.
Or
it's really
they're
scary.
having mandatory shutdowns of energy, and they can't heat their homes because it's simply not there.
Oh yeah, we're close to that.
Exactly, that's the reality for us if we don't figure this out somehow. Right? It's scary.
Yeah,
it is. It's scary. So I really did also want to touch on the safety aspect of pipelines and how much we invest in the safety of pipelines. I mean, one of the most common objections about pipelines from layman individuals is that they're just not safe, okay? They're not safe. They leak everywhere. The construction processes are not safe. Just everything about it is terrifying for people. Can you talk a little bit about some of the efforts that we do as an industry and your company to that effect?
Yeah. So like I said before, like any pipeline that's running, you know, near a populated area is going to be under the jurisdiction of PHMSA, which is a Pipeline Hazardous Material Safety Administration. And with that is a large amount of regulations that we have to follow. And a lot of those regulations are surrounding, and majority of them are surrounding the safety of the pipelines. So there's requirements on the construction side. So making sure, the right material is selected, that the pipe is pressure tested, and make sure the x-rays are x-rayed to really make sure that the integrity of the pipe is there. And we do all that testing.
They x-ray the pipes?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yep, you x-ray the welds to make sure there's no...
How do you get an x-ray machine that big?
There's different. They have like a truck, and they strap like a.
I am taking you out there.
Yeah,
I'm taking you out there.
Yeah, and Midstream is not my
just
forte.
So you know, pigs aren't really pigs. Okay, they're not really pigs. We're not.
I think
shoving
is that
pigs down the line.
where they try to make sure that the pipelines are empty? Is that what it is?
Well, so there's two different types of pigs. There's cleaning pigs, and then there's like smart pigs, which are analyzing the pipe.
We actually, just as a teeny tiny funny story, there was a gentleman, a landowner, who literally called like the animal whatever, because one of the guys on the line said that we were shoving a pig down the line. And when they showed up,
how big was the line? How big was the line?
I can't even remember. I'm like, it's really seriously not a pig. But that poor man's like, you're shoving a pig down that pipeline?
Oh,
yeah.
Really
that was a perfect example of why we should have educated.
Correct. Educate the landowner before you do
so
this.
So that's like all on the construction side. And then there's like, as far as like permitting, like DEP permits and everything with E&S control, so erosion and sediment control. Making sure the water's protected and everything. There, you have to have an engineered plan that has to be approved, and you have to upkeep on that. So that's all from the, kind of construction side. Then you kind of get into the post-construction side, and one of the main ways we protect our pipe is we put cathodic protection on it. Mm-hmm. So that's a cathode anode environment. So your water heater at home has a anode in it to prevent it from corroding. An anode, we call it a sacrificial anode, but basically what you're doing is you're putting a charge on your pipeline, a negative charge, and that anode attracts, the electrons to it. And so those anodes, they call them sacrificial anodes because they corrode and the pipe doesn't. So we protect our pipe that way, and we have to check it, and we have to do close interval surveys and cathodic protection surveys, make sure our rectifiers are running, make sure that pipe has adequate protection on it, and make sure it has good coating on it and everything. So, and then we do leak surveys. We run smart pigs to make sure there's no corrosion happening in the pipe. We take corrosive gas samples. We take liquid samples. I mean, there's a huge amount of things we do.
What is a smart pig?
Sorry. So there's different tools that you put part of the suite on the pig. So you have like a deformation tool that shows you if there's any bent or deformed pipe. And then you can put a tool that you have sensors that rub the wall and tell you if there's any corrosion, pit loss, MLF tool. You can do an XYZ tool to make sure you can pinpoint exactly where the pipe is, elevations and stuff. So there's a whole bunch of different tools that you can attach. We just ran a debris tool in a pipeline recently that shows you if there's any water or sand or iron sulfide or anything in it. It shows you how caked on the stuff inside your pipe is. So there's different tools and stuff that you can.
And I think that's probably a common misconception for the average individual too. It's we don't just construct these things, cover them up into the ground, and then never look at them again.
Well, there'd be no point to that because it's like we're selling product. Yes. Why would we want to put our...
But I think people think that. It's
right.
like, it's under there, and then they do nothing, and now it's going to explode.
Right. So you have a vested interest
to
make sure the integrity of your equipment is okay.
I mean,
and
it's
an
asset.
Also environmentally sound.
Yeah, correct. I mean, you spend multi-million dollars installing a pipeline. Of course, you're going to do whatever you can to make sure that asset's protected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you referred to the DEP, being out there and regulating a lot of things. I think it's worth mentioning that the DEP itself is actually funded by the oil and gas, industry. Mm-hmm. It is our impact fees that actually pay for DEP. Right. So we are physically paying to be held accountable. Right. I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's our processes that pay for this team of individuals to also make sure that we're accountable out in the field. So
that's amazing.
It is amazing. Crazy. Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's not even touching on the actual safety that's involved for the individuals that we have out on these locations. I mean, these guys aren't just thrown out there. They go through lengthy training courses and are OSHA certified and all of these types of things to make sure that the entire process is safe from start to finish. I'll have to see if it's still on LinkedIn, but I had a pipeline come through this side of my property at one point. I had Range Resources drilling it, fracking at the front, drilling at the back, and I had the coal mine putting an extraction fan to this side. And I actually went on my side-by-side and I filmed it from start to finish. and I put it out there on LinkedIn, and I had so many just individual people reach out to me, and they're like, "We're so glad that you did that. It's not as scary as we thought it was, and it looks even prettier now that you've done it than before the pipeline went through." I'm like, yes.
Well, that's like we really do, and that goes back to what we were talking about earlier. We really do have to be our biggest advocates, because a lot of times when you do hear about pipelines and stuff, it's like the accidents that you hear about. And we really do need to do a good job explaining and showing people.
17 accidents compared to 5,000 accidents.
Right.
Correct.
So, yeah, we really do have to be our biggest advocates.
So how often do you conduct those tests to make sure that your pipeline is okay?
Yeah, so, I mean, it kind of depends on the regulation. It depends on class area, how populated it is. But, I mean, we have a calendar. There's stuff we're doing monthly. There's stuff we're doing biannually. There's stuff we're doing annually. It just depends. But every pipe is being looked at every year, you know, whether leak survey, CP survey. I mean, those are things we're doing annually. You have to.
Does your audit, so when you get audited, do they check to make sure that you do?
Yes. So there's different audits they do, but one of the ones they do is a record audit, and that's specifically they look at making sure that you're doing stuff when you need to be doing it in the time frame that's required by code.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, we are getting kind of closer to our time here. So I just want to kind of take a moment. First of all, thank you, Kyle, for coming and see if we kind of have any final thoughts on this. I mean, I think, you know, sometimes the drilling side is like, you know, everybody's like, that's the glamorous side. You've got these big derricks out there and everything else. And pipelines are seriously probably the most important thing that we should be discussing right now.
Absolutely. Especially with all of the opposition. That's why we need to have that debate.
Correct.
And I will say this in closing, like if you see someone who's constructing a pipeline or someone who works for an oil and gas company, so go and ask them what they do. Absolutely. And have them explain what their job is and everything. I think a lot of people's, you know, eyes would be open and they would find out a lot about what really happens. And they're good people and they're willing to talk to you and share what they do.
They're excited to talk about it usually. They want to share that knowledge. It's just we tend to be a little bit busy. When you're doing 60, 70 hours a week, you don't always stop to talk to people.
Oil and gas worker.
Yeah, exactly. But the bottom of the line is that they are good people. They will be happy to share with you what they are doing out there. And Kyle, again, I just really want to thank you for coming on. I think there is a lot more to talk about pipelines, guys. So I think we'll probably end up having several more episodes on this subject. Yeah. I'm sure we'll get lots of questions.
Kyle brought us gifts.
Yes.
I just wanted to start a gift challenge.
You know, hats,
It's going to be hard to beat Kyle. You're very pleasantly surprised.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us. This has been Energy First with Sarah and Jen and Kyle, and we look forward to speaking with you all next week.
And this is your local station, 590 AM, 101.1 FM, WMBS. And the weather watch, clouds this afternoon, then mainly clear tonight, a low of 32. Mostly sunny Wednesday with a high of 69. Wednesday night, mostly cloudy with a chance of showers and a low of 48. Thursday, partly sunny, not as warm with a high of 59. It's pretty warm though. Showers and windy Friday with a high of 51. Cloudy and breezy Saturday, the high 42. And for Sunday and Monday, partly cloudy, the high Sunday 45. 52 on Monday. We have clouds and we have 48. And again, this has been Energy First every Tuesday at 3:15 on your local station, WMBS. And you can also find them at your website
is www.sarahandjenconsulting.com.
So you can find out more, and you can join us again this time next week for Energy First. The Tuesday edition of the Hillbilly John Show is up next on your local station, WMBS Uniontown. It's 4 o'clock.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Staples.
I'm Monica Ricks in New York.